Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming back to another edition of Teslavision.tv. We are going to review some work of a very special individual that has persevered through much of controversy in pursuit of technological advancement for all humankind. His work in Tesla-oriented technology is very interesting and has been gaining some monumental support in popular culture. We have here with us today Mr. Eric Dollard and also my co-host, Zoran Pilot, who has also been traveling around the world recently and has been meeting with various organizations like the Tesla Museum of Belgrade and educating individuals of much of the great work that is being conducted here and around the world on Tesla-related technologies.
Well, thank you, Sam. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad that you have this guest because, as you know, I live in California and I'm very much fearless person. But to be honest with you, the instinct worked very hard on me, in those two earthquakes that I survived here, and it's a Northridge and Whittier. And I really appreciate, and I'm gonna be very, very good listener what Eric has to say. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome, Eric Dollard. Oh, please, Eric, if you would,
Yeah.
tell us a bit about your recent campaign that has been very successful.
Well, I'm kind of at a distant end of it, so I'm just learning about a lot of this stuff now. So after being out in the desert, and it's fantastic that all this has happened because we really faced a big obstacle of having to come up with the bond to build on government property, and I didn't know if we were going to make that through that, and it's absolutely fantastic that that's happened now that things can really start to advance.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for our listeners, Mr. Dollard has begun a project to make an advanced seismic warning system, and it's apparently built on Tesla-style technology. Would you please enlighten our audience a bit on how you feel that this seismic warning system is predicated to Tesla technology?
Well, actually, it's an advancement on Tesla technology made by Ernst Alexanderson. And then I made an advancement upon that in order to make it a wideband system where you weren't confined to one resonant frequency, but it would work over the entire audio frequency band up into the higher end of the VLF part that only like coyotes and rats can hear, up about to 50 kilocycles. And that basically is my own invention. It took about 30 years to figure it out from an analytical standpoint. Then about 10 years, the antenna wasn't that hard to build other than finding the parts, but it took 10 years to develop the special receiver to go with it at Landers, California, and then upon its completion, it was promptly taken away from me.
Hmm, I see.
So now I'm trying to start over again, but it's not, at this day and age, I can't just go back to RCA or Bell Telephone and get the parts I need because those organizations don't exist anymore. And the parts all appear on the internet if you can even find them for massive quantities of money. Right now, we need a power supply for a project we're working on, and just because the stuff's made by the phone company, somebody wants almost $1,000 for it.
Ooh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Wow. So what other technological or financial hurdles would you say you're currently undergoing to continue with your project? I mean, you're well funded with pursuing all the materials, and I understand you have a brilliant idea of utilizing old telephone poles, as it were, to essentially cut down on material cost. And you're essentially having a really great project for that could possibly be replicated elsewhere in the country for utilizing old modes of electrical transfer.
Yeah, it's basically what I'm building now. It's not on the San Andreas Fault where previously it was. So it's more of a demonstrator model. One thing that made this possible is when the government took over a certain tract of land there, there was about maybe a mile and a half of utility poles carrying a cable television coaxial cable. Uh, there's 45 poles in the right of way, and I'm not really enthused anymore about digging 45 telephone pole holes, if you know what I mean. Plus finding the poles and the rest of that. So one major portion of the labor is done there, and then the same organization on kind of the other side of that tract of land out there in the desert has, on the Death Valley side, has about maybe, I would say, 8 or 10 miles of pretty damaged, but a lot of useful parts of the J carrier telephone lines that we need to make the Alexanderson antenna out of. So once the winds stop and it starts to warm up, we're going to take down about 2 miles. It's going to be a lot of work, and then pack that up and then start to put that up for the Alexanderson antenna system. But before we put the Alexander antenna system up, we have to clean up the coaxial lines that are draping all over the place and remove some of them. Those busted poles we have to replace. So basically, because of the weather conditions, and you only can work like April, May, June, and then it becomes like November, December. We're expecting about within 1 year we will have the Alexanderson antenna up on the poles.
Ah, okay. Awesome.
And
Now,
then in the meantime, I have to find the terminal equipment, which is going to be a lot of obsolete Bell telephone wireline carrier stuff. Fortunately, I just came across some very valuable items in trade for some work I did on a system that somebody else has. And then the money that's left over from the Indiegogo thing, there's $15,000 after the government bond. I have to start going on eBay now and finding the pen recorders for the mechanical seismograph end of it and the electrical indications. The University of that area has donated a complete seismograph pickup installation to us, which is a massive step forward. So fortunately, in this place I'm at, which I'm kind of keeping a secret, there's the government support level is high, and that's going to save me a lot of effort having to make my own stuff or go out and find this stuff. It's actually, everyone's really excited how there's some kind of karma that's just pushing this whole project forward.
Eric, obviously, Indiegogo campaign was successful. You have a good followers. Your idea is very much noble. When you talk about the government support, why they wouldn't support even more? I mean, we always, whenever the earthquake is, we witness, they're saying and claiming the prediction cannot be done. And we very well know that animals have that instinct, that they have that sense of listening, those frequencies, that's actually pretty much what you're trying to do. Why they are not getting more involved, and what secrets pretty much they would love from you to be revealed, and what you kind of hiding in sense, that is protected as your intellectual property.
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with a complicated situation. Not all government agencies are friendly with other government agencies. And there's certain government agencies that despise earthquake prediction because that's where they derive their funding. So they're not your friend in these type of situations. But then there's other things going on communications-wise here and scientifically. The seismic aspect of it is only one part of what's going on here. The Alexanderson network is that I'm building is a highly generalized system that will allow for studies of propagation and many communications and many other things. So that is kind of why the project is getting supported. It's not being governmentally supported by people that are interested in the earthquake stuff. Those people would try to shut the project down. So I'm really in a very delicate situation talking about this stuff on the air, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely, understandable. I mean, you've been a scientist and you've been acclaimed, a writer. Can you take us a little bit back, basically of your interest, how did you get into the, all this electricity, and how do you associate yourself with Tesla work?
Well, my interest in electricity goes back to very, very early childhood, when the things that would happen with power lines when I was about 5 or 6 years old were so stunning when something would go wrong that, it made an impact on me as to what was going on there and how these things came about. So about the age of 7, back in the 50s, you could do stuff. You can't do these things this day and age, but I was allowed to hang out with the line crews. And then they taught me the principles. And then about the time I was in the 5th grade, the local power company started providing me with a lot of special education material from the corporate office there. So at that time, I mean, I was basically capable of constructing any outside plant, transformer banks, delta Y configurations on them, sectionalizing switches, dead end poles. I knew all that stuff in the fifth grade. Then RCA got involved my junior high school year, first year in high school, and then they gave me free run of, was one of the biggest radio transmitting facilities on the planet. And there was a lot of, insurance paperwork and complications that I had to figure out a way through to get, so that I can hang out, around 12,000 volt systems and all that as a juvenile. And that was all taken care of by the school and my parents and RCA. That was a major step forward, because then at that point, the original prints for the Alexanderson system and the people that worked on it there, the Bellina station was a singular Alexanderson system that no one knows about. None of the ones that are portrayed today in any way resemble it. And that was all made available to me, along with anything that I wanted to do there in the station to be part of its operation, like tuning up transmitters or fixing equipment. So with that, and then in my senior year, I don't know exactly how this came about. There's a number of possibilities. One is by my senior year in high school, I had all the necessary FCC licenses to be any kind of radio or radar engineer. So the phone company showed up, looked like a couple FBI spooks. They came into my geometry class and pulled me and my closest friend out of class. They said, "We want you to come outside. We want to talk to you." My first response was sheer terror, because, I figured, the thing that wiped out all the TV reception last night in town that I was experimenting with got me in big trouble. And they wanted me to come once a week to one of their Bell telephone facilities, and they had some plan for me. So they brought me there, and they gave me free run of the facilities, not to the extent of RCA. I mean, there always had to be somebody with me, and I was more directed. But they gave me lots of books, and then they wanted me, when I got out of high school, to go to work in the telephone company. So by the time I graduated from high school, I was already an electrical engineer.
And how did you discover that curiosity? Pretty much we always talk about that creativity and your vision, your interest. It was kind of hidden in you, and you discover your godly icon in you, and you start pursuing that. I mean, it looks like it's your life. So where do you see, of your prior achievement and what you hope to achieve?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a big jump from high school. It's a long story,
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, to describe the way that I think and operate, I don't know if it's possible or people will understand it, because you have to remember that I'm a feral human, and and to be brought into the standard environment the people that live in is hideous to me. It's the first thing I want to do is run, and it takes days to get over it. And it really overwhelms me, and it gives me bad dreams and all that type of stuff. So I work on a level more like, I would say like a coyote. So whatever a coyote's objectives are, that's kind of what my objectives are. I don't know how to convert it into human terms. So
sure.
Yeah, the thing is I want to do this, but I can't do this. And then I do this, and then it's destroyed. And then, I'm living in a retrograde society that's equivalent to, a fully loaded railroad train going over the Tehachapi's at 80 miles an hour, and you climb up to the front to find out where it's going so fast, and there's nobody in the controls.
There you go.
So I don't know what to say about any of it. So now I've been directed by whatever forces and voodoo and whatever to this particular project. So I'm going to make another round for the Alexanderson. Now, what I want to point out, okay, is when I had graduated from my relationship with RCA and Bell Telephone, RCA actually continued for much longer after high school, and went into the Navy, and then actually got to have problems thrown on me that nobody in the Navy could figure out, and I wasn't, I didn't know everything back then either, and then start to apply this stuff, and then helped me build up my own personal power, so that, I really, after I got out of the Navy and had all these incredible experiences and responsibilities, it wasn't really possible for me to go back into normal life. So RCA had a plan for me, kind of, I don't know how I would say, but none of us at the time, me or the district vice president or the technicians I worked with, really had an idea of where the situation would go. But the complication that was existent, that was a problem for all of us, is that HF and medium frequency radio was being superseded by the satellites, and RCA needed to come up with some kind of advancement beyond that that would keep those technologies operational. So at that point, everything was turned over to me. The corporation died a couple of years, so my position in the company never transpired. And then Dianne Feinstein converted San Francisco at that time, and so all my equipment was smashed, and the whole neighborhood was bulldozed. So I became a street person. I lived out of garbage cans for years.
Wow.
So in that process, then I could no longer use equipment, so it was time to learn mathematics. So, and I lived in the bushes outside of somebody's house that turned out to be Follow Farnsworth III, the son of the inventor of television, and that created a big shift right there. Because then family secrets that had never been revealed to the public were revealed to me, how this guy made radio tubes that powered themselves, and I actually held the things in my hand. It was a joke, actually, by Philo. He didn't think I could figure them out. And on top of that, I was related with RCA, which was an enemy of the Farnsworth family. So, but when I explained to him how the tube worked that I'd never seen before, he was thrown back in his chair, and the family adopted me. And so that kind of helped me learn new things and keep going. And then because it was only math, there was no more parts, he gave me a couple of very important math books. Then I discovered that a lot of the stuff that was taught to me by RCA historically and technically left out some very important details, and that all landed right on top of Nikola Tesla. So I got the best biography for Nikola Tesla, the one by J.J. O'Neill, Prodigal Genius, and I started reading through that, and I couldn't stop. I read the whole thing from front to back until the library closed. It left me so nearsighted I could hardly find my way out of the library from reading the whole book. And that transformed me forever, because then I realized that I didn't know everything about electricity, and nobody knew everything about electricity, and really nobody knew anything about electricity, and there was new things to be discovered. And then later on, all the notes and diagrams that I drew on park benches, and, and in coffee shops and all that, living on the streets, started to get out in public. This Borderlands sciences thing latched onto it, and then I developed some kind of popularity through that, and then I started to get funded to do things, and then the things I got funded to do got destroyed, and then I got funded to do other things, and then those things got destroyed, and it just kept going on until recently everything was destroyed. My car was vandalized, my coyote was taken away from me, my installation was, I still don't know what's going on there. I need somebody to investigate it. So it all took the big squat, and I was left completely destitute in the desert. With
Wow.
nowhere to go, and sabotaged car, and no money, and so I had to get on the welfare, which normally you can't do, but I was able to do there. And then I started hanging out with some people in the museum that read a lot and wanted to know about this stuff, and so we started having these little Thursday morning get-togethers, and then that got me inspired to start writing stuff, and that started this whole series on energetic form that led to where we're sitting right now. So that's kind of the life story of Eric Dollards, with lots of giant holes. And
Can you tell us a little bit about your new book on polyphase mathematics? I believe it is posted on the Energetic Forum.
well, it's starting to get posted on the energetic forum, but it's a massive project because there's over 2,000 equations in this book. So what came about is a popular lecture was requested of me to be presented, I think like last June to July. And this was like several months in advance, and I didn't know if I wanted to do it. I was in a situation where people were screwing me up again. It was kind of another quasi-kidnapping thing. I got tricked into something that, these people were going to support me, and then, now they're defaming me on the internet and all that. And in the middle of that crisis, I was requested to produce some lecture At that point, I really had no interest in much writing anything anymore, but I decided to go about it, and then so I didn't know how to start this thing, and then so the publicly what was requested of me is people wanted to know about my four quadrant theory of electricity. So I tried to figure how I was going to start this, and then once I picked up the trail, it almost became a daily obsession. I spent 8 hours a day on it for about 4 or 5 months, and after I gave the talk, it kept going. And it turned into this book, the four quadrant representation of electricity, and then in the process of trying to explain things in terms that anybody could understand, I learned all kinds of fascinating things. And then there's another project I'm working on with relation to a particular type of interference that's being generated by the power company. And a number of papers have requested me to that. And I go, okay, well, it's time for me to go back to something that I learned in high school and I wrote papers on a long time ago about imaginary numbers, is let's take this thing the whole way. And it just kept going, and I made more discoveries, and until now, basically, I've written a book on complex Versor algebra and imaginary numbers and alternating current that has never been done before.
Wow. That is phenomenal, Eric. Oh my gosh.
So it started off. Steinmetz was pretty much the end of the classical mathematics for electricity, but the Tesla polyphase system really defies conventional mathematical analysis. That's the problem. And a Westinghouse engineer by the name of Dr. Fortescue came up with a system of mathematics that, as far as the science of algebra goes, should have been an international hit, but because he was an engineer and an American engineer, it was ignored, except by the American engineering people, the industry and what have you, and they found through this guy's mathematics you can finally define polyphase power systems, but the mathematics that he wrote was so confusing and generalized, and people wrote books on it, and they didn't understand what was happening, and I'm stuck in a situation where I have to make engineering reports and present them to the government. They can't be wishy-washy. So I have to go back and reinvent the whole thing and take it to a level that no one had ever taken it before. And it just got me all excited. And I'm not done with it yet, but the theoretical end is done, and it'll probably, because it's like trying to squeeze an elephant through a quarter-inch hole, it'll come out on the internet over some period of time.
Pretty much, who do you have as a supporter? I mean, there is a lot of work that you put on yourself, and obviously it takes, a lot of effort, resources, and something like that. Do you have assistants, followers, that are working close to you?
I have one person who's in his late 20s, and he likes to climb telephone poles and dig holes and do all that kind of stuff and build things and be part of all this. So between the two of us and our Toyota vehicles, we go out there into the wilderness and tackle this whole thing, and that's really pretty much all we need. It's just a matter of, somebody paying for the gas and all that.
Okay, you already had some kind of results, and measurements that kind of showed your work and direction in which you're going, Is that something, that can convince certain investors, to push your work, to limit that you can do a little bit maybe faster or more comfortable?
Well, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, most of the people that are donating to this don't fully understand, all the math and engineering of it. That couldn't be expected. The people that do, are most of these physicists and all that stuff, and they have this Einstein religion that, they freak out. So those people will not support you. They'll figure out a way to screw you up. So I don't know. The thing is, I'm stuck in a situation right now where I was told I was going to be provided with a building and ultimately be taken away from me in several months. It was a lie. And I don't know how to get out of that. If I lose my building, it's going to make it tough. We're going to have to do all this stuff out of the automobiles, which is fine. I've done that before, but it's going to make it difficult. Plus, all the accumulated material is going to get lost. So it's another ransom situation, and it will probably, the ransom demand will be between $70,000 and $100,000 in order to keep my building. And this is going to be an issue that's going to be coming up here in about 4 or 5 months. But right now, from the government end, I've been advised to ignore that, pay no attention to it, and just blaze forward on this project and worry about what's going to happen later. So that's basically what we're doing. But at some point, I've got this sort of Damocles hanging over my head that's going to all of a sudden completely disrupt the whole deal. And then all in all, because, I've got, with the person I talked to helping me, and then there's another guy about the same age that, has gone forward and out of his own pocket, is putting together the so-called Tesla magnifying transmitter and the cosmic induction generator. And, and he needs some kind of financial backup. I mean, so basically, just to break ground, we're looking at, the director of the organization says $250,000 to make a real laboratory for Eric Dollards that just has the basic stuff. Fighting with the power company and trying to get the right power anymore is nearly impossible. That's one of the things that instigated the writing of this AC mathematics paper, because I have to prove that the whole electrical grid of the United States is going in the retrograde, and it's either going to turn into an EMP generator or an EMP receiver, and everything's going to take a squat.
So for people that are watching this, beside, financial power, is anything else, that you need and somebody that could watch this, can get back to you in touch and kind of support your work and help you what you're doing?
Is anybody that buys my papers or books or videos or any of that goes in to basically paying the utilities and the operating expenses to keep this building going, and that is like a tick in my neck the size of a football the way I live. I'm used to, I live on my Social Security and my Toyota Corolla in the bushes. The expenses are very low, and all of a sudden I got roped into this situation that I can't afford. So it's fortunate that people are buying the material and the videos that I've made, because otherwise the lights are going to get turned off.
As I said, me being, a person who is really uncomfortable, with that rattling, living in California and fearing, that big one that's supposed to come, I think, absolutely work needed, this type of discovery to be resolved, because obviously it should be some kind of way predicting these disasters that happen.
Well, I mean, it worked in Southern California. The Northridge earthquake, that was, I believe, I wasn't at the station at the time, but the people who were there said there was an 18-hour notice on that one. The Landers earthquake, oddly enough, the beginnings of the station there in Landers that I built, and of course it was on the epicenter, didn't need a lot of fancy equipment then, and that was another 18 to 24-hour warning from what I understand from the people there. Plus, I picked that one up at my station in Bolinas, and on a long-distance path through the ionosphere, which at Landers is the same thing I picked up from Japan 48 hours before that earthquake occurred. So it's pretty definite now that these electrostatic waves and earthquakes are tied together, and I know the details of it. The station at Landers was not an experimental station. It was an engineered station designed to serve the Southern California area. If another station needed to go up, and it was mainly for the Southern California Gas Company and LA Department of Water and Power. It's not something you advertise and you don't get on the internet like Chicken Little and scream, that the ground's going to bust open day after tomorrow. That'd be a stupid thing to do. It'd be make more of a disaster than the earthquake. But that station's destroyed, and it would probably cost $1.5 million to put something like that up again in Southern California. And statistically, the next big earthquake, statistics are dangerous to fool with as far as prediction, but statistically, the next big California earthquake will be in Southern California. It will not be in Northern California, and it will happen within the next 4 or 5 years. And in general, earthquakes since the Indonesia one have become 10 decibels stronger, so what used to be a 7 is going to be an 8, and what used to be an 8 is going to be a 9. And, the U.S. Geological Survey is not making anything that works, and is going to make sure that anything that does work doesn't work. And it's $1.5 million, and I'm 62 years old. and I don't have 30 years to make another one anymore. So these are all the parameters of the situation.
Let me ask you something. I mean, the same situation was with Tesla, the amount of ideas and discoveries, his body couldn't carry that long. Where we can meet you, where we can talk to you face to face, how do you pretty much engage with the people who wants to know more and, basically to get in touch with you?
Well, after the Tech Zombie episode, there won't be any more face-to-face. It's the basic thing to do is I have a general delivery address because in the eastern Sierras, there's a lot of people that live way up in those mountains and they come down every 1 or 2 months for their mail. It's amazing. There's people that walk hundreds and hundreds of miles up in those mountains and then they come down to these towns. So being that I'm one of those kind of creatures, I have a post office receptacle in Lone Pine, California, and the best thing to do is to write me.
Yeah. What's about this Energy Science Technology Conference?
Okay, now that's going to where I'm going to switch over the AC thing. I'd like to keep working on that, but at any rate, I have to come up with a new topic. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the theoretical and practical details of this whole Tesla and Alexanderson and all of this type of radio that does not involve electromagnetic waves and does not involve the speed of light. And of course the telluric system, for advanced seismic warning or submarine communications or talking to ships or whatever it might be is all based on this. So that process, the seed just sprouted on it about a month ago, and it's hard in the beginning to say exactly how it's going to go because it's going to be, pretty soon here it's going to light off to 8 hours a day of writing. So it's a complicated subject. It's not going to be like the last one, where it's all historical and, and you see pictures of ancient Greeks like Plato, and,
Sure.
and pictures of beautiful, coastal towns in Greece. It's going to be more, complicated relationships and a lot of it is going to be explanations of what I've already written in what I call the RCA book, which is out under the title Wireless Giant of the Pacific, because in my historical resources study there for the National Park Service and the holders of the station license, KPH, is I had discovered what Alex Anderson had really built there that nobody talked about. And this is, it's a mind-boggling electrical system that nobody had ever even talked about before, or the theory, or any of this type of stuff. And so that is part of the book I wrote, is the mathematical and the archaeological study of all that and the diagrams. So I will be getting into detail explaining the difference between magnetic transmission like RCA used and we use now, the Tesla transmission, the Alexanderson system, and some of the even earlier systems that were electrostatic modes of transmission, and explain in such a way that you can understand these things, what the electrical dimensions are, why the speed of light isn't part of everything that's going on and it's actually something that was just added on, and give a kind of a popular level theoretical basis for all this stuff, and then there's diagrams of things that, that can actually be assembled that work.
Wow. Well, speaking of the Tesla technology and the aspect of transmission, I'm a bit curious as to what your opinion is of the actual tower rebuild effort. I understand currently that there are some hurdles that unfortunately don't allow for the tower to be constructed where it was originally intended. But what of other potential locations around the world that could potentially rebuild that effort, or is there, in your personal opinion and expertise, is there any possibility that could happen?
Well, I don't know. It's something that really belongs on a Navy base somewhere. But at any rate, we have located an abandoned, well, not an abandoned, but an old Navy antenna field that's now somebody's private property. And the idea is to build the small scale model of this type of transmission system on the 160 meter ham band, we have the some small World War II transmitters that we've been using for the cosmic induction generator work that will work on that. So we have the poles, we have enough necessary ground wire. We have to make negotiations with the property owner. We don't know how that's going to work out yet, but it might. And so there are plans to put together a very small scale model of what would have been a Wardenclyffe on the San Andreas Fault near San Francisco, and attempt to put a radio beacon of the Tesla variety on the air so that various people or agencies or whatever can experiment and see the feasibility of using this as a transmission medium. So that those plans are underway, but all of this stuff takes a lot of time and fooling around, and there's everything's in your way. There's always, wherever you go, there's somebody that wants to screw it up. And the closer you get to the coast, it's like a potential gradient. It starts to rise exponentially until when you reach San Francisco, the gradient is infinite and nothing is possible in San Francisco.
My, wow. Okay. Well, I guess I would like to add, I understand that you're currently engaged in multiple crowdfunding efforts that have essentially helped you grow and such. What is your personal opinion of for inventors, or any advice that you would give to inventors that pursue crowdfunding sources versus actually going to the government for support and things of that nature?
Well, don't go to the government support unless you have friends in the government.
Well, I guess that would.
Yeah, you're not going to get anywhere. So the thing is, you're going to have to. I mean, I don't know. Like I say, for me, it's a remote thing because the public funding thing involves all of this internet activity. There's people that work on that put massive quantities of effort into it, but it's a foreign thing to me. In my world, I don't see that or know about it. So it's really hard for me to talk about something that exists in another dimension, if you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So I don't really know how to advise people. First of all, you're going to have to come up with something of significance that's worth dealing with to begin with. And I don't really see where, a lot of people really have much of anything going on. So that's kind of a first complication. And the same dead horse of Soviet sailors conspiracy, that people have been whipping on to the point where there's not even a skeleton left, and they're still talking about the same thing. Well, that's a whole level of hopelessness. So I wish there was somebody. Well, actually, there are a few people through the energetic forum thing in my writings that are, presently building this stuff and have got successful results. The light bulb lights up, and if the light bulb doesn't light up in the engineering world, you don't get paid in the end. So they got it that far, and so that's encouraging. More and more people seem to be learning how to build and do this stuff and make it work. They don't particularly need a lot of money. They're just fooling around with small coils and stuff and models. I mean, it would be nice if somehow, they had some level to support that. The problem is, it's pretty much most people, because they have these lifestyles that consume money. They have to go out and work for their lifestyles to the point where there's no money left over and there's no time left over. So I don't know how they can get out of that. So I really don't know what kind of advice to give people, when there's all these different situations against it.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. Well, we're very happy for your progress, Eric, and I definitely would like to know, would like to invite you out to the Energy Independence celebration that happens every July to celebrate Nikola Tesla's birthday. We'll talk more about that, I suppose, after the show, but I'm very curious about your own opinion of this idea of energy independence, and how long off do you believe that to be a reality for everyone? Like, what hurdles do you feel are there, and how long away do you think that we will have a fully independent, sustainable energy infrastructure?
Well, are you talking about like the so-called free energy or energy synthesis, or more like solar panels and windmills? Can you clarify that?
Well, I suppose more so along the lines of generalized breakthrough energy.
Well, the whole so-called free energy thing is I've kind of dropped that deal because I don't have an AC laboratory anymore. I don't know where I could find the parts or how I could afford it. So I pretty much had to drop all my alternating current power work. There is in the same neighborhood that's putting together the what I call the long lines project with the telephone lines and all that. There is a move to acquire the old city substation building that the power company hasn't trashed the interior of yet to do an AC laboratory, but it will take quite some time to negotiate with the power company and to come up with, they're probably going to want like $500,000 or $1 million for the building and all that, and that pretty much should be one government agency paying another government agency which pays the power company. I don't know how I can get back into that kind of work. I wrote a number of papers on energy synthesis. People have done experiments. Nobody has really come up with anything yet that turns the kilowatt hour meter backwards. Of course, they don't do that now. They're all smart, so you can't figure out what they're doing. And but at any rate, when the meter goes backwards, then somebody's got something going, and I don't know. That's kind of a lost deal for me. And the device I have in my car that does this uses this special vibrator, which after 10 years is all worn out. So now I don't have that anymore, and I don't know where to find the part. And all these things are looming up on me fast. Things, 20 or 30 years have passed, and all my stuff's worn out. I can't find the parts to fix things or replace it anymore. So I kind of dropped out of all that.
I understand. Well, I guess for our listeners, for those of you unfamiliar with the work of Tesla, if you could possibly, Eric, briefly explain to them the difference between the way Hertzian waves travel versus Teslian waves.
Okay, well, the secret to Tesla's transmission system is it's monopolar. So the electricity that's currently in use uses a number of poles. In most people's education system, you learn about plus and minus, and there's always a positive terminal, a negative terminal, or an active lead and ground. Of course, once you get into three-phase and four-phase, that all goes away, but it's still multi-terminal. But Tesla came up with an electrical system that has only one phase. So if you want to transmit it in the ground, and the ground's the active terminal, well, then the immediate question is to the technician, well, what are you going to ground to? Would you have to be the moon or Mars? And that doesn't make any sense because the wire wouldn't hold up. So what Tesla figured out was a way to ground into another dimension, to use the words of physics, or the proper term for it is counter space, so that he could push against something without having to have a wall or something to back against. That is the secret to Tesla's telluric transmission system. And the transformers he developed could create this monopolar situation. And oddly enough, Tesla did not even understand that, because he was mostly working by experiments, and the understanding of electricity was so primitive and impaired back then that he arrived at this through a succession of experiments, but nobody was capable of defining it analytically. That had to come later when they started building these large substation transformers, which had so many windings on them and had such low losses that they would go into Tesla modes and blow up the substations. So that's where Steinmetz came in to lay the groundwork mathematics, and then General Electric continued through another one of their engineering researchers, a guy named L.V. Bealey, and he came up with that equation. And then lo and behold, Alexanderson used that form for his transmission system. So that laid the groundwork for a theoretical basis for this, and then through my experiments and my mathematical work is with the AC paper that I'm writing, I do take it to the monopolar consideration, and I demonstrate the devices are working, and in the upcoming lecture I'm going to get really deep into that.
Okay, well, we're definitely looking forward to reviewing that. I would like to know, though, if there's any individuals that you would like to thank for your recent successes and such?
So, well, I can thank Aaron for, helping me put all this together. That's the first start. And then, I can thank the people that I don't know the names of that came up with the money so that we can provide the bond. And then, I'm thanking a number of the people in the government that I can't give the names out, that they're willing to take the time, to make my project part of, their daily work. And then, I thank the people that, that write me letters and want to know about stuff, and then I write them back and they build things, and then they send things back, and then and then we do more figuring, and then so there's a lot of people to thank that I either can't mention the names of, or I don't know, or then that I do know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Eric, and we are so grateful for your work and all of your study that's going into such great vices, and also sharing the legacy of Nikola Tesla. Well, Eric, your work has been absolutely phenomenal, and we really appreciate all the wonderful work you're doing for mankind, and we want to thank you for joining us today on Teslavision. Everyone, we encourage you to check out ericpdollard.com, and Eric, this definitely won't be the last time we'll be hearing from you.
No, I enjoy doing these things, so I'm looking forward to the next opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. We're definitely going to have you on back.
Best of luck, Aaron. Thank you very much for joining Tesla Talk TV, and we're looking forward to hear from you again.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Project that could possibly be replicated elsewhere in the country for utilizing old modes of electrical transfer.
Yeah, it's basically what I'm building now. It's not on the San Andreas Fault where previously it was, so it's more of a demonstrator model. One thing that made this possible is when the government took over a certain tract of land there was about maybe 1.5 miles of utility poles carrying a cable television coaxial cable. There's 45 poles in the right-of-way, and I'm not really enthused anymore about digging 45 telephone pole holes, if you know what I mean, plus finding the poles and the rest of that. So one major portion of the labor is done there, and then the same organization on kind of the other side of that tract of land out there in the desert has, on the Death Valley side, has about maybe, I would say, 8 or 10 miles of pretty damaged, but a lot of useful parts of the J-carrier telephone lines that we need to make the Alexanderson antenna out of. So once the winds stop and it starts to warm up, we're going to take down about 2 miles. It's going to be a lot of work, and then pack that up and then start to put that up for the Alexanderson antenna system. But before we put the Alexander antenna system up, we have to clean up the coaxial lines that are draping all over the place and remove some. And then I made an advancement upon that in order to make it a wideband system where you weren't confined to one resonant frequency, but it would work over the entire audio frequency band up into the higher end of the VLF part that only like coyotes and rats can hear, up about to 50 kilocycles. And that basically is my own invention. It took about 30 years to figure it out from an analytical standpoint. Then about 10 years, the antenna wasn't that hard to build other than finding the parts, but it took 10 years to develop the special receiver to go with it at Landers, California, and then upon its completion, it was promptly taken away from me.
I see.
So now I'm trying to start over again, but it's not, at this day and age, I can't just go back to RCA or Bell Telephone and get the parts I need, because those organizations don't exist anymore. And the parts all appear on the internet, if you can even find them for massive quantities of money. Right now, we need a power supply for a project we're working on, and just because the stuff's made by the phone company, somebody wants almost $1,000 for it.
Ooh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Wow. So what other technological or financial hurdles would you say you're currently undergoing to continue with your project? I mean, you're well funded with pursuing all the materials, and I understand you have a brilliant idea of utilizing old telephone poles, as it were, to essentially cut down on material cost, and you essentially have a really great Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming back to another edition of Teslavision.tv. We are going to review some work of a very special individual that has persevered through much of controversy in pursuit of technological advancement for all humankind. His work in Tesla-oriented technology is very interesting and has been gaining some monumental support in popular culture. We have here with us today Mr. Eric Dollards and also my co-host, Zoran Pilot, who has also been traveling around the world recently and has been meeting with various organizations like the Tesla Museum of Belgrade and educating individuals of much of the great work that is being conducted here and around the world on Tesla-related technologies.
Well, thank you, Sam. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad that you have this guest because, as you know, I live in California and I'm very much fearless person. But to be honest with you, the instinct worked very hard on me, in those two earthquakes that I survived here, and it's a Northridge and Whittier. And I really appreciate, and I'm going to be very, very good listener what Eric has to say. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome, Eric Dollards. Oh, please, Eric, if you would,
Yeah.
tell us a bit about your recent campaign that has been very successful.
Well, I'm kind of at a distant end of it, so I'm just learning about a lot of this stuff now. So after being out in the desert, and it's fantastic that all this has happened because we really faced a big obstacle of having to come up with the bond to build on government property. And I didn't know if we were going to make that through that, and it's absolutely fantastic that that's happened now that things can really start to advance.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for our listeners, Mr. Dollard has begun a project to make an advanced seismic warning system, and it's apparently built on Tesla-style technology. Would you please enlighten our audience a bit on how you feel that this seismic warning system is predicated to Tesla technology?
Well, actually, it's an advancement on Tesla technology made by Ernst Alexanderson. Some of them, those busted poles we have to replace. So basically, because of the weather conditions, and you only can work like April, May, June, and then it becomes like November, December. We're expecting about within 1 year we will have the Alexanderson antenna up on the poles.
Ah, okay. Awesome.
And
Now,
then in the meantime, I have to find the terminal equipment, which is going to be a lot of obsolete Bell telephone wireline carrier stuff. Fortunately, I just came across some very valuable items in trade for some work I did on a system that somebody else has. And then the money that's left over from the Indiegogo thing, there's $15,000 after the government bond. I have to start going on eBay now and finding the pen recorders for the mechanical seismograph end of it and the electrical indications. The university of that area has donated a complete seismograph pickup installation to us, which is a massive step forward. So fortunately, in this place I'm at, which I'm kind of keeping a secret, there's the government support level is high, and that's going to save me a lot of effort having to make my own stuff or go out and find this stuff. It's actually, everyone's really excited how there's some kind of karma that's just pushing this whole project forward.
Eric, obviously, Indiegogo campaign was successful. You have a good followers. Your idea is very much noble.